Welcome to Cross-Platform Podcast, where we discuss how to solve productivity problems across platforms. I'm Augusto Pinaud.
And I'm Mark Gelwicks.
Good. For a moment, I thought I was on the
I wasn't sure. Yeah, that's I keep a little card up over the wall just to make sure I know what my name is at any given time. Because
with all the multiple platforms, that may happen once in a while.
You know, it's just one of those. This doesn't work as well as it used to. I'm finding that very quick. I'm having platform degradation between my years.
The sad part is there is no upgrade to that at this point yet. So we were discussing in the pre-show about platforms, and I was sharing this week we were having issues with the computers, the multiple computers, and the presentations, and using your phone as one of those platforms. We have Windows 11 announced this week, and they are going to heavily integrate with Android apps. That is really exciting. I think, in my perspective, even as an Apple user, I think the Windows putting Androids there, it's going to allow people to use the apps better. They live on their phone. Their phone is, for most people, their main phone. So it is going to be really interesting now that if you are an Android guy and you have a PC with Windows 11, all those things are going to be integrating and more. So what's new on your side of the world?
Aside from the dog that you might hear in the background, which is, there's another platform problem right there. Here's one of the things that boggles my mind a little bit about the whole Android on Windows 11. And we'll dig into Windows 11 quite a bit because that was the major platform conversation this week. The fact that there's going to be Android apps on Windows 11 is really nice. I like that. But here's the challenge. The store they're going to use is the Amazon store, not the Google store. And I've used the Amazon store on Fire tablets and all. It doesn't have everything. It doesn't have a lot of things.
It doesn't have a lot of things.
And that's going to be a problem. Now, that said, Microsoft is really, really pushing to get applications deployed through the Microsoft Store. So I think one of the things that they really want to do is have PWA. They said it flat out. They want PWAs. They want UWPs. I'm making up letters at this point. All of this stuff into the Microsoft Store so that it can be deployed directly to Windows 10 and Windows 11. That, I think, is a good thing. The fact of having the apps on the desktop is a good thing. Downside, this is a platform that's going to require more hardware, stronger hardware.
Well, and I wonder if, well, that's a good point. And I don't know, because they launched earlier this year Kindle Fire with Office apps, with the idea, they give you a keyboard, they give you the Office, and they give you the Office platform. So that is good.
See, but I've been hearing a lot of mixed bag about that configuration they offered. I mean, Amazon said, "Hey, we've got your productivity tablet for you." Yeah, it's a slightly souped up Fire 10 HD, which is still anemic compared to most tablets, and a keyboard. Yay! I don't know who they're really targeting with this. They're not offering.
I hope,
but I don't know,
because it reminded me to the what they were called in the 2006. We have these micro PC things.
Oh, the old netbooks, yeah.
The netbooks. That's what reminded me when I saw that. I say, "Oh no, the netbook is back."
And this goes back to our whole core of this particular episode is this platform choices, because this type of thing, Amazon saying, "Hey, we've got a productivity tool that's going to solve your problems." This becomes a platform choice, and the Amazon, I want to say Android experience, is a different platform than getting a Samsung tablet or an iPad or something else or a Chromebook. So all of these choices now really start to complicate themselves, because if you've chosen a tool, if you're on your PC or you're on your Mac and you've chosen something to work with, or you've been mandated something to work with, now as you expand the circle of your platforms, you got to make sure this is going to function efficiently for you.
Correct.
And a lot of these tools, they don't quite cross those borderlines as well as we would hope.
Well, and I can bring you an issue that happened this week. I had somebody, for the ones who are listening, for the ones who are seeing us, with big noise canceling headphones, for the ones who are listening, kind of the Bose, or there are Plantronics, but they're kind of the big over the ears, foam. And this person was telling me the problem is over this winter, it's perfect. Now that it's summer, I can't use these things all day because I'm dying on heat on my head. So this person was looking for something that they can use on their computer, on their phone, and move around in the same way it's used to do with these big things. And it's not as easy as you thought, okay? Because now you want something, this platform, she have a PC and an iPhone, okay? So you cannot go with the AirPods. In my case, I go AirPods. I have everything is Apple, so it doesn't matter. In her case, the AirPods doesn't connect that well with Windows. So we begin with Anchor, didn't work. Now we're going to try a Jabra version of that to see if that works. But the problem is you want the features that may not be available. This person was asking me, well, but I want to be able to listen one or the other.
Right.
Well, that's not available everywhere. And that is bringing a problem to this cross-platform where, okay, what do I do? And I have this tool. I put this thing on Amazon, and you glue this thing in the back of you put a plate on the back of your device. So let me raise the device. Okay, you put the plate, then you put it in here, and then you can put the phone in there, okay, and use the phone as your camera for Teams or whatever you use. And I have been recommending that a lot lately for people because it's easier to get a good headset that works on your phone than a good headset that works everywhere.
Right. No, I agree with you completely. I mean, I have, and it's a crazy little example. I recently got Soundcore earbuds, and if you're watching live, you'll see these. They're the little oval box earbuds. You put them in deep. But I had the exact same thing from Soundcore, just last year's model. The difference is these charge wirelessly. The case charges wirelessly. And I can use one or the other. And in last year's model, I couldn't use one or the other. Those are big features that, from a platform standpoint, make these very usable for me. The downside is I have to go through the effort of switching them between devices as I want to change devices. If I want to use my Chromebook and use these, well, I have to switch them over on Bluetooth. Often I'll go to use it, and it's like, why is it not working? Why is it not working? Well, it's because it's still hooked to my phone. So when we think about these kinds of tools and putting them in place, using something like your phone, I'm pulling something over the camera here, as a primary device, I have a little mini tripod stand that has a phone grip on it. But I use that quite a bit because I can sit it down somewhere, prop the phone into it, use the headphones or not. But I've decided that my platform that I'm going to use primarily is going to be the phone. Well, from a hardware standpoint, that's a pretty big decision. It's a big chunk of change. When we think about applications, we're not investing the same amount of money in applications that we are in hardware, but we sure are doing that in time, in effort, and ultimately in data. I mean, Augusto, you and I were chatting about the task management earlier, and we're both, Todoist fans, and we both like how it works. Among other applications. And Todoist is one of those things that I keep going back to. I have a huge investment in time and content in that application. Not necessarily money, but I do pay for it. But even so, if I'm going to stick with that tool, it's got to work across all my physical interaction platforms, which means it has to work on Android, on the PC, on my Chromebook. It should work on my Fire tablet. I should be able to get to it somewhere there. I should be able to get to it on my iPad. All of those things have to come together, because if I can't, if I have a platform that I can't use the tool that I've invested in on, it limits the value of that platform for me. And it becomes a chicken and egg kind of process. I have this physical platform now that I have to say, okay, what are the limitations that this combination, the art platform, places on any application I want to go use? I'll use Notion as another example. Notion works great across all these platform pieces that I want to use. Why? Because it's got a really strong browser presence, and browser seems to be the default factor in many of these conversations. Other tools don't work for squat on some of the devices, but I still have to use it. I just know then that I'm limited as to where and how and when I can use those particular applications. It's really a challenge for people, and they don't realize the bind that they can put themselves in if they don't think about this as a complete system. I mean, I often envision it for people as a triangle, because you have the hardware component, you have the software component, and then you have you at the top of the triangle. And it's an equilateral triangle. Everything is equal. If you can't interact equally with the hardware and the software, guess what? It is not going to work out for you. In the long run, you're going to be spending more time and effort than you are getting things done.
And that brings us to a really important place that I know you have considered this question, but I go day to day to people who have never considered the inside of that platform. Mm-hmm. You have devices you choose, okay? Devices you get, okay? Because, well, work gives you this PC, okay? You work as a contractor, okay? Mm-hmm. So you get the work, and sometimes you get the work and the client and the other client. Mm-hmm. You're working, and now you're carrying 3 PCs to do one job. And it's not every time you can say, well, that's fine, I will manage all in my other PC. No, sometimes mm-hmm. you need to carry those 3-4 devices, and each one of those devices, it's a platform. And also you have now the phone, and you have the tablets, and how are you picking those? How are you making sure that those platforms are working to your benefit? And number one, and number two, do you know which one is your main platform? Mm-hmm. Because when I ask this question to clients, the first answer is, oh, the work laptop. Really? So do you do more work on your laptop than you do on your phone? Mm-hmm. Okay. And when I ask that question, many times you see the light bulb come in and say, well, no, I do more work on the laptop. I do some work that only need to be on the laptop. Mm-hmm. Therefore, that's a reason. But their main platform really is their phone. But they have not yet come to how they can use the most out of that phone. Right. So their main device, it's not really maximized and effective. Their main platform is kind of a second thought instead of being the first thought.
Well, they've been told in many cases what their main platform is. If we isolate this just down to the work environment, they've been told this is your company issued computer. This is where your work will be done. And in many cases, that's exactly what it is, because they don't give you access to any of your other information through other channels. You have, RSA tokens, VPN connections, all of that stuff's there. That bubble is truly that, a bubble. But then you have to think about everything that you're doing that's not work related. Where is all that happening? It used to be you'd go sit down at the computer. You'd go sit down at the PC. If you look at, the GTD methodology, you always had a context of at computer, because it was a physical place you had to go. Well, now it's no longer a physical place because it's always with you. It's always available and accessible. And we haven't even talked about or introduced the idea of taking things like an Amazon Echo and introducing it as part of your process, part of your platform. And I seriously consider my Echoes part of my platform. Why? Because I can add things to my task list and I can add things to my shopping list without pulling out a device. So now, if I'm going to choose an application, am I going to be able to access that application or at least interact with it in some constructive manner through these other items? But when we start to now bridge those two areas of work and non-work together, work and life, we'll think about it that way. What is the common platform? Do we have a common platform? Is there a natural chasm between the two that we have to cross? I mean, if we think about it, we've got meetings, we've got calls and things like that. If you're working in a regular 9-to-5 type of environment, fine, you can put guardrails around those things. I don't know how many of us are actually working in those kinds of environments anymore. Yeah. I don't think very many. So when you have an after hours call that's going to be mixed in with dropping kids off or going out to dinner or something like that, well, now you're not going to be on your work laptop to know that meeting's coming up to take that call. So where are you going to put it? You're going to put it in your own personal listing? How are you going to track it? Are you doing double work? This is the challenge of the platforms that we operate within now. And we have to decide that even though we're often told this is the tool we will use for work, often that has to carry over into our own personal systems to be able to fit effectively into how things are done. I mean, I've tried for years to manage dual systems because I've been mandated it for clients, and I still have to do that. But I also have a ton of stuff that splashes over the dam and has to wind up being tracked in my own system just because there is no cutoff.
No. Same thing in here. I mean, I have over the years, the systems have my systems and the client systems, and and many things are on the iPad. And even in some points, I have had one iPad for one thing and one iPad for another client because it's too much inflow of that. But given I've been lucky to pick, to the most extent, most of my platform over the years. But what happened when it's imposed? As I have a PC right now for a client to my left, okay? And do I want to use that PC? Let's be clear, no. Okay, in case any doubt. Mm-hmm. But it isn't there. I need to be used for certain things. So when that happened, how do you include that into the platform array of things you have? Because I live on an iOS environment. I mean, I have more iOS around me than anything else, but those other platforms happen.
There's a lot to be said, though, and we haven't talked about buying into an ecosystem. Let's step away from the work environment where often those ecosystems are mandated for support purposes. Individual choice, or as a professional, choosing an ecosystem. The most common one you would identify is the Apple iOS ecosystem. And it makes sense. They have gone to a massive level of effort to make sure their stuff works with each other. If you have a Mac, you have an iPad, you have an iPhone, you have an Apple Watch, it's all going to work together, and it's going to work together well. That's part of the buy-in into that system. On the flip side, you have slightly different ecosystems. The closest thing I would identify would be something like the Samsung ecosystem, where you could have a Samsung Chromebook, a Samsung laptop, a Samsung phone, a Samsung watch. The hardware and the core operating systems are designed to work together extremely well. However, there are some aspects of the underlying operating systems that can cause problems. The aspects of Android versus a PC, the difference between Windows and Android. So there's challenges within those, but you're mitigating many of those challenges by choosing a specific ecosystem to operate within. Google is similar to that if you go down the Pixel route and things like that, although not as much. They don't have PCs as per se. So it really becomes the different levels of stratification within these platforms. We have to be aware as to, on the hardware level, how is all of our, quote, stuff going to interact? Then at the operating system level, then at the application level, then at the user interface level. That's a big one that we haven't talked about that can really hang people up. I mean, I look at so many applications that have a web interface and an iOS or an Android application that interacts with the same thing, and there's a significant difference in the user experience between the web and the application.
Correct.
One of my favorite tools is also one of the biggest criminals in this respect, which is OneNote. The web-based application, the desktop application, the Windows 10 application, the iOS and the Android application all work differently. And you literally have to make choices as to what features you use so that they're available in various places. I mean, tagging is a perfect example in that tool. So we have to be cognizant and thinking about where are our barriers that we're creating based on the things that we're deciding to introduce into our system. And that's where you and I get into this a lot. What do you do when you want to introduce something new, or you want to look at something new as a possible addition to your productivity system, you know, your personal platform? Well, now you got to evaluate it on all this crazy criteria. If it's just an app, great. Where am I going to use it? How do I access the data? Is it stuck just on this app? Can I use it on the web? Can I use it on the desktop? How do I get my information back out of it? All of those pieces come into play. Now let's add a piece of hardware on it. We've got, let's say, a new tablet. I want to introduce a tablet into this. Oh, wait, is it a Chrome OS based tablet, or is it an Android based tablet, or is it an iPad? Well, if it's an iPad, it's going to look different and it's going to work. So do I have authentication? All of these questions have to come into play, because if you don't ask them in the beginning, you're going to wind up asking them when it doesn't work.
Well, and you made a great point on hardware, but you also have it on software. So do you live on an Office ecosystem? Because yes, Microsoft is making big leaps to live on the browser and their tools, but you don't get the same things. Even on a PC, if you open a document on the browser, you don't get the same features that you get on the app. Right. And you don't get the same app if you open it on your phone or your tablet. So you want to do certain things. This happened to me this week. I was trying to do something on Excel, and I open and say, "Where is this?" So I go to the app. Where is this? So I went to the Mac application. Oh, here it is. What I wanted to do. I said, "Why? Really? I need to open 3 different things to do freeze panel." I mean, I wasn't trying to do anything complicated. Freeze panels was what I trying to do.
It's really interesting too if you look at the origin of many of the solutions as to determining why they have problems. And I'll use the comparison of Google and Microsoft.
Yes.
Google started off on the web, centered on the web. Its web-based applications are its strength. The applications that operate at the device level are kind of a fill-in-the-gap type of thing. They provide maybe 40 to 60% of the functionality, if I'm being generous, but they work. Microsoft's side started on the desktop 35 odd years ago,
right, and
has built from there, bridged into the web, and then has tried to come back. And again, you look at the apps maybe 40% of the functionality, the browser-based applications maybe 60%, the desktop, all kinds of crazy functionality that nobody ever uses. I think back to the heady days of CompUSA when I used to be a trainer for them, and you would go in and in a week you'd be teaching 3 different word processing applications, and you had Word, you had WordPerfect, and you had, actually we had 4. Yeah, no, it was Word, WordPerfect, and Lotus AMI Pro or AMI Pro. Oh my goodness. And you look for a feature and it's like, well, wait, where is it? I know this feature exists in one of these applications, but I don't know where it is. And Yeah, and I don't remember how to get to it, but I got to teach it. This is the problem that we have is especially if you have to operate within two platforms. If you're bouncing back and forth, say, between Google Workspace now and Office 365, well, how do I set full width margins? I don't know. I got to go figure it out every time. That's productive time lost.
Right.
And we have to recognize the fact that if we're going to ping pong back, even something as simple as just cloud storage, Google Drive versus OneDrive. Think, okay, it's cloud storage. How hard can this be? You can waste a ton of time between the two, especially if you're trying to manage materials in both locations, because they just don't operate the same. They'll never operate the same. There's no interest in making that happen, because then why would you use one product over the other? But we as individuals, as just people using these tools, we have to kind of think about, all right, which one works the way we do? Which one is willing to allow itself to be adjusted enough to work the way we do?
Right.
And then how do we integrate that into how we function? It's really hard. And unfortunately, it's also not something you can do just once. You have to do it all the time. It's a consistent evaluation.
And that is a really important point, because as you look into your own platforms and how they interact, that is important. Okay, how much the features that I may not get when I live on an iPad as my main platform, I'm going to lose because that's my main platform. Or do that means, okay, then I need to live on a PC or I need to live on a Mac? It is, at this point, it is not a hardware issue. It is a software development decision that not make them two player, because we have seen, and we can list many examples where the features are a pair. So it is a decision of the companies to a certain extent.
But it can be hardware compounded as well. And you're on the right track with the whole software piece. But often think about why many applications will come out on iOS before Android. Because iOS is known to be an easier platform to develop and specifically to test for. So the application gets deployed on there because the hardware has dictated that it's easier to develop in that environment. True. On the Android side, you have more devices to test for and things. But now let's flip it to the next step. Well, why would I develop a native app on either one when I could just develop a PWA, make it web-based, and all of a sudden be able to have it available across the board? What am I giving up as a developer to be able to do that from a functionality standpoint, and will my user base have an issue with that? What other capabilities do I need to have available? So when I look at tools now, I have 3 tiers that I go through, and it's actually kind of backwards than what you would think. I start looking at, does the application have a web interface? And is it a good one? It's like 1 and 1A. If it has that, I know that I have the greatest likelihood of being able to get to this thing from the greatest number of platforms I have. That's step 1. Step 2, what native mobile applications does this support? Does it have an iOS application? Does it have an Android application? If it has both, to me, that's even better, because it means it's a greater commitment in the development space. That they've only chosen one of the 2 platforms, I then have to say, yeah, okay, you may be a little light in the development department there. And then the third one is, does it have a native PC application? Honestly, it's a rare program that I care if it has a native PC application anymore. Because for the most part, I'm looking for something that has to fit through that top tier and that second tier. If I get all the way down to the third, there better be a really good reason for it to have a native application, or require it to have a native PC application for me to use it. And usually that's not productivity related. That's related to other functionality.
Well, and that is, my list goes similar. My list is, do you have an iOS? If you don't have an iOS, most of the time I just jumped you, because And my second thing is, okay, you have an iOS. What is your parity with the rest of the things? Because the problem is, I don't want to start trusting your app to discover, oh, but now I need to bring the Mac because really, or I need to add remotely to that Mac because that's where it works really well, and it doesn't do the same thing in the iPad. And yes, that limits the software that I can access, no question about it. Okay, that criteria limits what I can do, but at the same time allows me to be much more effective, much more productive, and work better. I have 3 iPads that are on the circulation, and I love the fact that I can move from one to the other and have exactly the same things, and I know it's going to work. And I know that if I grab my phone, even that my cell phone is the last device on my platform scale, okay, I will be able to access them because they are on the iPad too. I may not enjoy the screen size, but I can.
Right.
And that mobility and that flexibility give me a lot of power that if I will not have that, I simply will lose. So, and that's a main criteria on my platform choice. When people ask me, I don't understand how the iPad is your main machine. I always said, no, the iPad cannot do everything, but it can. The 90% that do, it do it so well that I can compensate the other 10% on productivity.
I'll give you a good example of that. And I agree with you completely on the standpoint of making those choice levels. The video editing tool that I use has a native PC application. It has a native Android application. And I chose that tool because that Android application I can run on my phone and I can run on my Chromebook.
Mm-hmm.
And the files are compatible between the PC, the Android device, and my Chromebook. So I can go through on my phone, shoot video, do preliminary editing wherever I am using the phone as the platform, then store those files in the cloud and then pull them down either to my Chromebook to work on them some more if that's what I have available, or pull them to my PC if I want to go big screen and do additional work with it. That was a driving benefit, not so much requirement, but it was a core benefit to operate within my platform. Up until that point, all the applications I had used for that type of functionality were limited to the desktop. So I would be literally shoot the video, shove it over to the desktop, and work with it there. I didn't have the latitude to be able to expand the scope of my platform. And I think that's one of the things that we have to always remind ourselves is that when we introduce hardware or software into our personal platform, we have to decide how and when do we want to interact with those things and what limitations does that place. I'll go back to task management. I would not try to manage all of my tasks through my phone. It's just too hard because of the size of the interface to bulk move tasks around and do various things. Those are much easier on the bigger screen. That said, though, adding tasks, updating tasks, completing tasks, perfectly done on the phone. And often I will be sitting at my PC with everything up and I'll still grab my phone to tap tasks off. Mm-hmm. And I know that's going to sync over because of the tools that I've chosen. But that requires that conscious choice. And I think we have to be very careful as consumers and users of these tools to be cognizant of the fact that it's not always in the developer's mind to say this needs to work every place. They're going to develop where they can. Go ahead.
And I think you make an important point there to understand where and how are you going to be more productive with this platform. Mm-hmm. What are the things that you do on the phone? And I don't know if people spend enough time or time at all thinking really into these things. What are the things that I need to do what are the devices that I use? Where I prefer to take a Zoom call or a Google Meet or
Mm-hmm.
a Microsoft Teams? Why? Do I really need to see the big screen on the Microsoft Teams? Or really, I do most of my calls are audio anyway, so I can get them on the phone and just put the headset. Um, we were discussing about the headsets, how well my headsets exchange, or I now need to have a pair of headsets for the PC and then a pair of headsets
Mm-hmm.
for the tablet and a one for the phone, and then I need three chargers more.
Yep.
You know, don't make me start into chargers and adapters because and cables
No.
on that. But all that is part of the platform, and how are you going to integrate that into make the platform more powerful and better for you, to make you more productive for you? And one of the things I have found that I have not understand forever, okay, was fine. I get the PC for work, okay, great. Okay, I got this one for the client. And the first thing I figured out is what was required for me to do in that PC. And everything else is out because I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to spend time on that machine. Okay, the
Right.
minimum time I spend, the happier I am. But you need to figure that out. You need to figure that out. You cannot go and say, well, this is the platform and I'm not even going to try to do. No, no. If you can figure that productive things on that platform, now you can make the experience way more enjoyable.
And just to be clear, the one thing we haven't talked about is the fact that the platform doesn't necessarily have to be powered. If you use a bullet journal, if you use just a paper notebook, that has to be considered part of your platform. I've used paper journals off and on for years, especially traveler's notebooks. And calendar management with a paper book can be a nightmare, especially if you have digital calendars that are included as well, because you're looking at copying over, updating, and things like that. But you must consider that part of your platform. If you are most effective using that analog tool, then dagnabbit, that's got to be part of your consideration, because otherwise you're just going to wind up getting yourself stuck. So it's really around, and this is the one thing that I can't stress enough. Understand the what and the why of what you're trying to do before you figure out or worry about the how you're going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
If you know that you need to capture tasks on the fly, that's the what. And you know the why is because if you don't capture them, you're going to forget them. Then the how part becomes the embracing piece of the entire issue. How am I going to find all the different possible ways to eliminate barriers to me capturing tasks? And whether it's going through, paper, whether it's going through an app on your desktop, whether it's using your smart home devices to do voice entry, figure it out. But make sure that the platform is meeting the what and the why that you need to have done. If you don't do that, you're just spending money and time on tools that aren't really benefiting you.
Yeah, and the other thing is, if once you figure that out, then get something that you're excited to use. My wife her calendar may be digital, but her life goes into a paper notebook. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and many times over the years, she has come and said, well, maybe I should have stopped buying this. She used lavender. And yes, lavender is expensive. I get it. Okay. And many times she's come, should I change for something cheap? No, no.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because it works. Yes, it's not the cheapest tool in the platform, in the place. I get it. But you live in paper. And then this allows you to take pages out, put pages in, organize the pages.
Yep.
So it makes your tool really functional. I remember the first, and I'm going to drop my ID here with my date of birth, but I remember the first tablet PC I got for myself, and I got it, and before I bought it, I went to my boss and say, if I bought this piece of hardware, will you sign in so I can use it in the machine? And this is 20 years ago, where bring your own device to work was not heard of.
Right.
Okay? And he said, why you are doing that? And I explained to him, well, this is what I do for a living, in case you aren't aware of. Okay. And if I, with this device, I believe I could do it better.
Mm-hmm.
And he was completely puzzled. And he signed it. I got the device,
Mm-hmm.
no problem. But most people on those days look at me like, why? Well, because if I can use a better device on my personal platform that is going to allow me to be more productive, I'm already ahead of the game.
And that's probably the biggest thing that people miss out on. They get into this mindset of, well, I wouldn't use that technology, so why are you doing it? We fail to take into account that productivity is an extremely personal thing. No matter what the corporate mandate, whatever the business mandate, whatever the the latest common knowledge thing, whatever meme you've seen lately, it is a very personal thing. And certain tools resonate, certain tools don't. And just because it works for you doesn't mean it's going to work for somebody else, and vice versa. So when you look at these things, like your iOS setup, I could probably make it work, but it would not work as well for me.
No.
And that's just, it's nothing against either platform or any of the platforms. It's all about the top of that triangle I talked about earlier. The linchpin, the weak point, is actually the person using them. And that can also be the strongest point if that person recognizes the fact that this has to work the way I need it to work to be able to be effective. We were talking about this earlier about task lists, and this is a bit of a tangent, but it's an important thing. I go through and I have tried to keep generalized task lists based on the common knowledge understanding that you shouldn't have too much stuff in your to-do list. I have found time and time again, and even recently, that just doesn't work for me. I need that level of tiny levels of detail. I may have 30, 40, 50 tasks for a specific thing. Why? Because it means that I have a comfort level with my platform that it's not going to let me miss anything. That's a conscious choice that I have to make. I would not dictate that to anyone else. I might recommend it to give it a try and say, if it doesn't work for you, throw it the heck out. But that's what we have to look at it from the platform side too. And before we started this show, not this episode, but this show concept in general, Augusto and I had a conversation about what this show should be about. And this, I think, is a great example of that. It can't be about one platform versus the other. Because as we've seen through this entire episode, there is no pure platform anymore. Nobody, I don't care how deep into one of these ecosystems you have bought into, you are not using pure ecosystem tech the entire time. You will be using other platform tools, you will be using third-party tools, and you have to have them work and interact. The best case to see that is when you start to look at automation tools. You look at things like Zapier and IFTTT. One of the common complaints we have on Productivity Cast is you have a tool that comes out and there's no external access. There's no way to get to your data. There's no way to interact with it. It's a closed, walled garden. And that creates problems, especially when we have these heterogeneous platform models that we operate within. If your data can't interact, you might as well write it down in a paper notebook, because that's as far as you're going to be able to interact with it then.
That's correct. And you don't know when your platform can change. But normally the thinking behind the platform doesn't. When you have spent the time to think that what works, how you work, how your platform should work, that normally doesn't change. The device, the operating system change, okay? And sometimes they are catastrophic. I mean, on Windows, on iOS, on Mac, I mean, you get the new version, and then, iOS 14, that is the most current version of iOS, when it came out, you could not delete email with your keyboard.
Mm.
Okay. That was a massive monkey wrench on my productivity system. I could not delete. I needed to use the finger to delete, so that takes longer. That happens. Okay. But if you understand where your principles are, then you can adjust to the problems of the platform, and that will happen.
Well, and I'm looking at that right now, and a lot of people are looking at it the same way. Windows 11 just was released. We talked about it at the top of the show. And one of the challenges is that there are a lot of existing Windows 10 machines that are not going to support Windows 11 outright. Just to give you a benchmark, Microsoft Surface devices, out of the 23 that are currently out there, only 11 of them will support Windows 11. My machine that I operate on every day, 8 to 10 hours a day, will not support Windows 11. So I have to make a conscious decision now. The underlying operating system of one of the key parts of my platform is changing. Do I want to change to that new version of the operating system? What is that going to entail for me? Well, normally if it's a mobile device, or if it's something like a Chromebook or something, yeah, you probably just have to upgrade the hardware and it comes along for the ride. Something like a PC, that's a different conversation, because I can live in the old system. I can stay on Windows 10. But if I want to go to 11, I now have to think about everything that lives within this device and getting it over to a new device. And how does it change? How does it change my entire system? What's the impact scope of this? And how long is it going to take me to mitigate that impact scope? And here's the biggest thing. How much productivity am I going to lose while I'm doing that? I mean, we've always thought about, I can just pick up the data here and move it over to there. Yeah, but we know that doesn't necessarily work. It never does. It never goes that smoothly. So we have to say, am I going to be able to make this adjustment? I have a challenge. I was telling Augusto about it earlier. This device that I have is an all-in-one PC that has an HDMI input as well as an HDMI output. So I can drive two monitors off of it, but I can also take an input from a laptop and turn the all-in-one into the monitor for the laptop. You think, okay, that's a convenient thing. That is a core part of my platform productivity, the way I have my environment set up, because I have two work laptops, one for company, one for client, that I use all the time, and I channel their outputs to this monitor. Now if I lose this piece of it, now I've got 5 displays instead of 1. It's a major impact wrinkle that I have to compensate for. And we all need to be aware of our environments before we start to change them. Augusto, you and I have talked about this so many times on Productivity Cast about how you have to have a trusted system. Anytime you poke at one of the 3 corners of that triangle, you are introducing the opportunity to not trust your system again.
Correct.
And that is a huge, it's a risk. Often it's a necessary risk, but it has to be a planned for risk. It can't be an unmitigated one.
Yeah, and as to close the show, I can relate to that. When the iPad Mini, when it came out, it was something that I really, really enjoyed. So when the iPad Mini 5 came out a year ago, 2 years ago, I went by and get one, and I was, that can make this now my main device. No, I was so used to now the keyboards and all these things with my iPad 12.9 that it didn't work. It worked for other things, but it didn't work to be my main machine. And I was all excited about it and bought it and thought I'm going to be able to carry less stuff. No. So, and what was the mistake? I didn't thought it through. I'm going to admit I went and run and get the iPad Mini because it was the iPad Mini. But if I will have thought on the device and the peripherals and what I need, I may have considered, maybe not. Maybe I need to buy something different.
Yeah, I've got an iPad sitting here right now that is just sitting on a shelf gathering dust because I can't run the latest version of the application I want to run on it. That's a non-starter for me now. So, yeah, this is the kind of show that I want people to come away from without an answer, but with the knowledge that there are questions you need to ask of your system as it stands currently. Look at your personal platform, personal productivity platform, if you want to call that. Understand it, not only at the hardware level, not only at the software level, but at your level, and say, okay, if anything changes or if I want to introduce something, what's the impact? Because as we've all seen, we can literally capsize a ship in a heartbeat by just making poor decisions around the latest and greatest thing that has come out, the bell and whistle. Test, try, play with. I encourage that highly. Before you make it an integral part,
that's where the careful is.
That's you use the old carpenter metaphor, measure twice, cut once. Well, in this case, measure about 36 times. Get ready to cut, then measure a couple more times. Then you can cut.
Yeah. So, and with this, we get to the end of today's show. Follow us where you listen to podcasts, like us or subscribe to us, and leave us a review. You can also interact with us on Personal Productivity Club. We are Augusto Pinaud on our Gelwicks. See you next time on your favorite device.